Hello everybody and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic. Hope you're doing well, and today we'll be talking about the box office from this past weekend. I don't know why I'm talking like that, but anyway, it saw Top Gun Maverick soar, as it says here from the Deadline article, to $557 million worldwide, which is an insane feat for its second week of release, and had one of the, if not the smallest week 1 and week 2 drops domestically that I think I've ever seen, at least since I've been covering the box office. I don't remember ever seeing a massive film like this making as much money as it is in its second weekend, having well below 50% for a drop-off in its second week. So it's doing incredibly well on pace to make a ton of money, and even has the potential at this point, because of how strong it's performing, to even maybe cross the $1 billion mark, and that might be even before Jurassic World Dominion, which I thought was going to be the first $1 billion film of the summer, since Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness has slowed down so much that it looks like $1 million for that film is now a bit out of reach. But before going any further, though, into this bit of news, please make sure you smash that like button, light up that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with that bell notification. That way you know every time a new video or live stream goes live on the channel. So as you can see right here, it talks about $557 million global through Sunday for Top Gun Maverick, whereas Jurassic World Dominion has already made $56 million in early international markets, and it is right now pacing well ahead of the first Jurassic World film and the second Jurassic World film. So already doing very well internationally. We'll of course see this weekend when the actual film comes out in the worldwide market, in a lot more markets, that is, whether or not the film is going to reach the heights of the early projections for the film, which have the film essentially making around $500 million here domestically, making probably well over $500 million internationally, and really setting the stage to be one of the most successful summer box office films for the year. But Top Gun Maverick is now also in that discussion with these incredibly impressive numbers here. If we actually look at thenumbers.com, as you'll see right here, it talks about how the film dropped only 29%. That's right, 29%. Now, this is a number that you would typically find for a successful film, for a film with very strong legs, and maybe the third, fourth, fifth, sixth week, right in between all of those weeks, right? If a film has very strong legs, you'll see it kind of, very slowly taper off and be able to stay pretty strong and have a pretty strong hold throughout the weeks of its release. But normally that is after the fact of the second week being over 50% in some cases, right? So for Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness, again, it was well over 50%. I believe it was 67 or so percent, 65, 67% for the week 2 drop off for the domestic market. And now it has consistently dropped in the 40s and 50s ever since that point. Top Gun Maverick dropping to 29%, or only 29% in its second week. If that means that, especially with the competition coming from Jurassic World Dominion, which is why I think the third week for this film is going to be especially important to really tell whether or not the film is going to have that that strong potential that right now is very small potential, but it could end up growing as the film's release continues, of reaching $1 billion, is how well this film holds up once competition like Jurassic World Dominion comes into the party. So obviously 29%, though, very, very strong for week 1, week 2. We'll have to wait and see exactly where this film stands after this coming weekend, and if the film is going to maybe lose some of the audiences that it normally would have lost in the second weekend during the third weekend instead. So we'll be looking at this film to see if it's going to be below 50% of a drop for the third week, because if it does that and it continues to have those sub 50% drops, or even in the 30s or 40s, you're looking at a film that has a lot of potential to be one of the biggest summer box office hits this year. We also have Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness coming in at the number 2 spot, dropping 43% in its 5th week of release, so still doing very strong, $9.1 million there. Third film coming out this week, or rather the number 3 spot this week, is $4.6 million for Bob's Burgers Movie, which dropped 63% in its second week of release, which, again, this is the typical box office reaction that you normally find for some of the bigger budget films that are out there in their second week of release. For a film like this, which likely did not cost all that much and didn't really make all that much in its opening, it is not all that great of news. However, we don't have the budget yet for the film. And so if the film's budget was around $10 million, then it's actually looking pretty good at $22.3 million so far domestically. But if the film costs closer to $30 to $40 million, well, then this film would be in a bit of trouble. Coming in at number 4 spot is Bad Guys from Universal, $3.3 million, another 24% hold in its 7th week of release. So this is an example of one of those films that had very strong holds from week to week. So this has been in the 20s or 30s almost every single week of its its release, which is why even after 7 weeks, it's still out at almost 3,000 screens. About 2,800 right now, dropped only 72 screens, so still making millions of dollars every single weekend, and this is doing very well with the younger audiences especially. So this, I think, is indicating, especially when you look to films like The Bad Guys or even films like Sing 2, that the younger audiences, that the families are going to see films, and they will likely be they'll likely be a very strong component of the success, what I think will be the success of films like Minions: The Rise of Gru, and potentially even films like Lightyear. Now, right now, the early projections have Lightyear is, pegged to make more than Minions. I think Minions might actually have a better shot or a better chance, simply just because of the fact that Minions play very, very well with kids. And so that is the reason why I'm kind of saying I think Minions might win that battle, but we'll have to, of course, wait and see for those films to actually come out and for us to get some box office numbers, updated box office numbers as the weeks go on before those releases are set to come out. Rounding out the top 5 is Downton Abbey: A New Era, making $3.1 million, a 45% hold from its second week to its third week of release. As you can see, it's starting to drop out of some theaters. It's not really doing all that much domestically. It is definitely the international market that could help this film reach its break-even point of around $100 million. Right now, it is still a little, it's still far off that mark, but it still has that potential to do that well, especially since there are a lot of hardcore Downton Abbey fans who either haven't seen it yet or, are going to bring their friends. What I think that this film and the box office for this film is actually indicating, though, is that the older demographic, the very old demographic, is not really back in full form and full force yet as far as going to see films in the actual theater itself. And I look at that because I see Top Gun Maverick, which is able to appeal to a broad range, a broad demographic, whereas Downton Abbey definitely plays more so with older audiences, and it's just not really bringing them out. It's making about half of what the first film in that franchise did. And so this is something that I think will have to be paying attention to, especially if anyone cares about Downton Abbey and any future potential films in the future for the franchise. Everything Everywhere All at Once, the superior multiverse film, made another $2 million. This is, again, that little engine that could up to $60.5 million in the domestic market, which has been the vast majority of its market, and it's already broken even, and it's doing very well. It's now making up to $9-10 million of profit, and it looks like that the end of that is not anywhere really in sight. It's actually added 247 screens. Again, this release just does not make any sense whatsoever. They had the weirdest release schedule. It ended up working for them, but I kind of wonder if this had a normal release schedule, if this film could have actually made a little bit more. And I think that A24 obviously is in a position where they're going to say, well, it worked, and so we don't have to do the what if scenario. But I do kind of wonder, because it is a pretty strong original film, and I think that it would have been interesting to see this film get a normal release schedule. Sonic the Hedgehog 2 coming in at the number 7 spot, dropping 30% here, $1.7 million. Looking like it's slowing down enough to where maybe $200 million domestically might be out of the cards for it at this point, but it is still doing very well. Lost City coming in at the number 8 spot, 35% drop for this film. Still out in several theaters actually right now, over 800 theaters in fact, even after 11 weeks of release. This is an interesting film because it had a late release in the international market, and because of that late release, this film has actually done a lot better than my original projections had. So just goes to show that sometimes my charting can be off. Sometimes I can be wrong. I am obviously a human being. But when it comes to this film, it actually makes a lot of sense as to why the charting was off, because of the number of international markets that it had not yet opened in, pushing this film well past its break-even point, and now to the point where it's even making a little bit of profit at this point in time. But I did want to point out that I had said that this film was not doing very well, as it was not until these international numbers started to actually roll in for the film. We had 2 new films this week, Crimes of the Future and Watcher. I have them in my chart. However, I don't like charting films like this, because when a film comes out at only 700 screens, it makes the predicting of films like this a little bit more difficult. When it's a limited release, it really does become just a bit more of a difficulty, and so it'll be interesting to see where these films end up. We don't have budgets for these films, so I can't really say whether or not they are successful at this point or not, but I really haven't heard that much about either of these films coming from Neon, IFC, Midnight, so definitely coming from ones that are more of the indie film, independent film genre, but still one that is, I think, looking into and worth looking into, as all films typically are. One of the big stories, of course, of the weekend, though, is the fact that Morbius, that's right, it's Morbin time, some of the greatest memes of all time. Still, we're not able to actually get people to the theater itself. The film was re-released in over 900 screens and made $310,000, which is a whopping $300 per screen. Yeah, this is what happens when giant corporations and giant studios listen to Twitter mobs. So whether the Twitter mob is a meme army, which is hilarious and fun, or whether it's a woke mob, which is the bane of all existence, hopefully this is a kind of a sign to them that it just doesn't work. It does not actually result in anything really positive, because either you're going to destroy your franchise with woke identity politics, like we've seen with things like Star Wars, etc., or you'll have decisions like this where you'll say, oh, people are talking about Morbius. It's Morbin time. People are so excited about going to see it. Let's put it out. And then no one actually goes to see the film. So yeah, hopefully this is a sign to them of that fact. But anyway, it is Morbin time, $163.2 million so far in its entirety of its release. And oh yeah, the memes have been great for it. But getting a little bit serious here, Top Gun Maverick up to $557.2 million worldwide. Insane numbers. This is doing very well, already broken even, already making hundreds of millions of dollars in net gain profits, and will likely make a lot more, especially if it goes to that $1 billion point. Right now, you can see it is up against something. Right now, I have this actually in a chart up against Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness. This is from thenumbers.com. And even though Doctor Strange did beat Top Gun Maverick in its opening weekend, by the end of its opening weekend, $187.4 versus $126 million. And if you add in the holiday weekend for Top Gun Maverick, that would add it to 160.5 versus the 187 of its first weekend for Doctor Strange. As you can see, at the end of the second weekend of release, it has caught up and surpassed Doctor Strange. Now, Top Gun Maverick at $295.6 million, whereas at the same point of its release, Doctor Strange was at $292.6 million, which means this film is outpacing by a very large degree the film Doctor Strange. And if that continues, if those strong holds from week to week continue, you could see this film end up making well over $400 million domestically, which would be a very good sign for this movie's prospects of reaching $1 billion, since it is doing very well domestically. It's also doing very well internationally too, but this is a film that is playing a little bit better to the domestic market, I would say, in various ways. If you look at the actual, like discrepancies rather between these two, you'll notice $295.6 million for the domestic versus the 261.6. So it's doing well. It's keeping pace. The international market is keeping pace domestically, but it is a much stronger film domestically. So that's why it's going to be interesting to see where this film ends up by the end of its run, not only in its total, but also in the breakdown. I think that the domestic box office will still be stronger. This is definitely a film that's made a lot more for the domestic market, but it'll be interesting to see where these numbers fall nonetheless. We also have the Bob's Burgers film up to $24.1 million. So if the film cost very little, that's very good. If the film cost a lot, or cost a lot for a film like this, then it is in a bad spot. If you look at Doctor Strange: Multiverse of Madness, it has crossed the $900 million mark, now at $910 million. I suspect that this film still has enough gas in the tank to be able to reach the heights of the $950 million or so that many of the so-called experts were saying. But I also say and believe that you could even see it surpass that number. Now, whether or not it does, or how quickly it does it, or where the end result for this film is, it's really hard to say at this point, especially with films like Top Gun Maverick causing a lot of competition, taking a lot of the market away from this film, but also films like Jurassic World Dominion set to come out. This film is going to be in a very crowded, competitive market, and it's pretty much made the max amount, or it's made most of the money that it's going to make up to this point. $1 billion is, in my opinion, out of the running. So again, something else that I have been wrong about, but that, of course, is because of massive drops for this film, not just domestically, but internationally as well, and also competition from the likes of Top Gun Maverick exceeding expectations by a very large degree. New films like Watcher made $826,000, but hard to say, with this being an independent film, whether that's good or not. Crimes of the Future, the newest Cronenberg film, $1.4 million. Again, no budget for the film. Bad Guys at $218.7 million, doing very well for that film. Everything Everywhere All at Once is up to $78.1 million internationally. As you can see, though, the domestic market is a huge portion, and very the largest portion for it in the long run. Jurassic World Dominion up to $55.7 million, opening up in smaller markets. And we have The Lost City, as I mentioned, $185.1 million, puts this film well on the way to actually already at the point of being able to make its money back, which is a very good sign for this film. If we actually look to the box office charts, because we like to look at charts, if you go to my website, ombreviews.com, you get access to my box office charting, and also you get access to tons of other fun stuff there. You'll notice that we have Top Gun Maverick's projections. So right now, because of the $557.2 million in its second week of release, I'm projecting the film to make somewhere between around $800 million to up to $1.1 billion. So this is going to be the biggest question, is how well does it do over the course of the next several weeks? If it continues to have very strong holds from week to week, you're looking at a film that's likely going to end well over $1 billion and be one of the biggest films of the year, and maybe even be the first $1 billion film. I thought that was going to go to Doctor Strange 2, but because of massive drop-offs, that did not end up happening. Different scenario here with Top Gun Maverick, because we're seeing very strong holds, very positive word of mouth. The film is fantastic. It is great, and I recommend that everyone goes to see it. It is a film that could do very well. So for a film like this to be able to get to the $1 billion mark in 2022, all without China, I think would be a very good sign, and also just good news in general for the box office, just to continue to show you don't need China, one, to reach $1 billion, let alone to make money, as this film is already making massive profits. The film, though, average-wise, could end up around $955 million. So even if it doesn't get $1 billion, I suspect this film will probably end in the $900 million range. This, of course, is dependent upon those holds from week to week. The Bob's Burgers film is expected to make somewhere between $34.4 and $48.2 million, which, who knows? Who knows where this film ends up because of the budget, and we don't know what the budget is, so we'll have to wait for those numbers to actually come in to be able to say anything really more about it. If you actually look to the current numbers as they stand today, you'll notice Jurassic World Dominion, we do have the budget for that film. It costs around $165 million is the current projected number for the movie. Break even is around $412.5, so we'll see these numbers get a lot higher when it opens up actually, worldwide. But this is the current numbers in the early releases, so it's off to a pretty strong start, but we still have a lot of ways to go for that. Top Gun Maverick at $557.2 million has already made $79.3 million in net gain profits. That means by the end of this upcoming weekend, it'll be well past the $100 million mark as far as net gains are concerned, and this film is set to be a multi-$100 million box office hit and success, and those are huge numbers from an objective standpoint. Hundreds of millions of dollars in net gain profits are always a good sign, especially for a big budget film like this. It's Downton Abbey right now at $79.3 million, still $12 million in the red. Firestarter still also dropping out, still $10 million in the red. This is a day-and-date release on a streaming service, so we'll, again, probably hear something about the film not being that much of a, flop because it made money here somehow. We haven't heard that yet, but I'm sure that will be the discussion nonetheless. The drop isn't, or rather the loss isn't that huge to not be able to overcome in things like 4Ks, etc., but still not very good nonetheless. Doctor Strange: The Multiverse of Madness, $910.2 million worldwide, puts the film at $246 million $246 million for the net gain profits for this film, which are massive. And this is something that, for some reason, I'm getting some pushback on, is people saying, oh, this is not actually as big, or this isn't really a lot of money, and the film's not as big of a success. No, I mean, I can argue saying that they would have wanted this film to reach $1 billion, and that this film, based on its opening, was set to do that, but obviously since the film is not very good and it had massive drop-offs, it was not able to continue that momentum. The fact remains that this is one of the most successful films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. The film is very close to the $1 billion mark, and regardless of any of that, it's made $246.1 million in net gain profits and has the potential to make upwards of around $300 million in net gain profits. And no matter what you think personally about the film, that is objectively a high number. When you're making hundreds of millions of dollars in your returns, this is after you subtract the budget, this is after you subtract marketing, etc., that is a high number. And then you add to that what will likely be some people still buying it on 4K, still some people buying the Steelbook. I'm sure there'll be a Steelbook for it too. You're looking at massive numbers here. And this is something where if you look at down the charts at all these films, you're looking at a film like Sonic the Hedgehog, over $100 million in net gain profit. That is massive. If you look at a film like The Batman, $161.5 million, still That is also massive because it's well over 100 million in net gain profits. Could that have been higher? Absolutely. But is that still a lot of money? Absolutely. If you look at Sing 2, $114.9 million, that is get net gain profit. That is a large number. And then you look at Spider-Man No Way Home. And obviously this is a film that just blows all the competition out of the water, but that's also because this film was almost a $2 billion film. And so that $833 million in net gain profits is huge, is gigantic. However, that does not take away the over $100 million gains of these other films. This is not me saying that Doctor Strange 2 is a good film. It's not. It's not a very good film at all, but still doesn't change the fact that this film is making massive amounts of money, massive net gain profits, and that is just an objective fact. Anyway, what are y'all's thoughts about these films? Do you think that Top Gun Maverick is going to be able to get to $1 billion? I think that the numbers are there to really, the numbers and the path forward for the film to get to that point are there. We'll have to wait and see where those numbers end up. So let me know your thoughts about that or any of these other films that I mentioned in the comment section down below. If you like this video, smash that like button, love that fire button on Odyssey. Y'all all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to my June Keeper of the Bifrost and Chosen of Valhalla level members, Brandon, let's go Brandon, Christopher Bowman, Garrett Searles, Hymir Irie Hymason, Jeff Toon, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Laura, The Modern Major General Story, Father Luca, Mike Jackson, for the win, Mad Mitch Dunaway, or in chat reviews. Make sure to check out his YouTube channel. He just hit 1,000 subscribers. Rosetta Allen, check out her YouTube channel as well. Stan Andrian, Miss Martin Muses, check out her YouTube channel. And also, of course, the amazing Tina B, Empress of the Universe. Check out her YouTube channel, especially her show, Soup to Nuts, that she does with the amazing Stephanie B. Thank y'all very much for supporting me over on Patreon. And a huge shout out to all of my subscribers as well over on Subscribestar at these levels. Matt 317, Storm Tracker, the R, Fast Reaction, Mr. Roy, and also, of course, J-Rod, the Beer Guru, and ZK-Man. You guys are amazing. And a last shout out to my locals members. We have Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan. How about a hockey player? We have Mike Jackson for the win once again, Robert Barnes, and Brett D90. So I want to say thank you again for being my members at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and the Chosen of Valhalla levels. If you want your name specially shouted out at the end of every single video and live stream, please check out my links at the Patreon and Subscribestar. You can find those in the top link in the video description, the Willow link, as I like to call it, where you can also get access to things like giveaways, things like the podcast I do with John the Flick Pick Flickinger, and other cool stuff like that. Anyway, thank you all very much for supporting me for the month of June. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.